Hi, hello everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy to be here doing a Facebook Live in Imperfect and Unapologetic. I'm so excited. This is like the very first Facebook Live here. So this is super exciting. So we're talking about something that some of you might be fairly familiar with. I know I certainly am. We're talking about perfectionism today. So I wanted to hop on here to talk about how to recognize and overcome a common stumbling block to productivity and accomplishment, which, as it turns out, is perfectionism. So this week, we're doing the Slowing Down to Speed Up class, where I'm sharing like tips and tools to help you get more done with less stress, while also having more energy and time to really enjoy your life and get out of it what you want. Because, hello, right? Being who you want and getting what you want is the point of living your life, and coaching women to be who they want and get what they want. That's my passion. That's why I do what I do. So I thought this was really important to get on here and talk a little bit about this common stumbling block to productivity that we face a lot, that we deal with. So it's perfection paralysis, right? Which is also known as perfectionism. So I'm a total and complete recovering perfectionist. For a very long time, perfectionism was my nemesis, right? And by that, I mean, my nemesis, what I mean is that I knew that it held me back. I knew that it got in the way of me being productive and accomplishing so many things I really wanted to do and that I wanted to accomplish. Even it held me back from trying things that I really wanted to try and do, but still didn't know how to shake it. Like, I still didn't know how to release the perfectionism, how to let it go, or how to stop it from holding me back, right? And as you guys all know, like, I'm a life coach. Like, seriously, I needed to face that down and figure it out, because that's what I do. I help women face down and figure out the things that are holding them back and help them heal it and release it and overcome it so that they can rise and shine. Because hi Hazel, good to have you here. And because that's what I do, right? I help women let go of the things that are holding them back so that they can rise and shine, because we all want to rise and shine, right? And we all deserve to rise and shine. So I needed to walk my talk with this perfectionism business. Like, I needed to figure out, what is it all about? Like, what is this thing? Because it was a stumbling block, like a real stumbling block. So so I needed to figure it out. And this is what I discovered about it, which I had no idea. But this is what I discovered about the perfectionism: is the kind of the mind twist, or the deception with perfectionism, is that we think perfectionism is the pursuit of perfect. But perfectionism is actually the avoidance of failure. So it's actually the opposite of what we think it is. So that made like so much sense to me. It was like a real aha for me. So I'll say that again. So we think perfectionism is the pursuit of perfect, but perfectionism is actually the avoidance of failure. And when I understood that, when I got that perfectionism is actually that avoidance of failure, I was able to recognize that really what perfectionism is perfectionism is a coping mechanism. So it's a coping mechanism, not a weakness, right? And that created a complete shift around how I viewed perfectionism in myself, and how I viewed perfectionism, period. Because it shifted the judgment of it, right? Because instead of thinking of it and judging it and criticizing perfectionism as a flaw, I recognize that it was like a coping mechanism, and coping mechanisms are developed by our child mind to avoid a painful consequence. So some of the big things that we'll develop a coping mechanism around is to protect ourselves, to avoid the pain of rejection or abandonment or humiliation or punishment. So when I understood that perfectionism was my child mind's answer to avoid a painful emotion or a painful experience, with that understanding, then I could have compassion for the perfectionism instead of judgment for it, or instead of judgment for myself for needing that crutch or that coping mechanism of perfectionism. And then I could also give myself like permission to let it go, because coping mechanisms, they serve us in childhood. I mean, they're essential to our survival in childhood. We need them. But in adulthood, they actually hinder us. So pursuing perfect to avoid failure actually turns into that paralysis that we're talking about, that holds you back from completing or accomplishing things, or even like trying or experiencing things. So the underlying belief that we're still carrying around from childhood, from to fail, right? And there's going to be consequences to that failure, and we're not going to be able to handle it, because as a child we didn't have a lot of control over things. So that was quite likely the consequence, that there would be some kind of consequence that we would suffer in some way. So the solution then became to avoid the pain by being perfect, right? But the catch with that is, now as adults, is that perfect actually doesn't really exist, right? So it's like an abstract concept, because the perfectionism of anything can't really be clearly defined, right? So what, like, say, Hazel, what you might see as perfect would be different from what I see as perfect, and what I see as perfect would be and what you see as perfect would be different from what someone else would see as perfect, and what they would see as perfect would be different from still another person. So we can't clearly define perfect, because everybody would interpret it a little bit differently. So for example, like attire, right? So we can all agree and define attire. So, right, it's black, it's round, it's made of rubber. Attire can be clearly defined, but we can't all agree on what perfect is, right? Because can you describe perfect, right? I mean, no, I can't either, right? I can't describe perfect. There is no description for perfect. It's like this abstract concept that we make up in our mind, right? So perfection is actually an impossibility in reality. It doesn't exist, and therefore, because it doesn't exist, it can't be defined, it can't be achieved, it can't be attained, right? So it's like a mirage, right? Perfectionism is a mirage. We keep chasing it, but it doesn't actually exist, right? So if it doesn't exist, how can it really save us from anything, right? How can it save us from that failure that we're attempting to avoid? Like, if perfectionism doesn't exist, it can't save us from anything. So how is it going to help us if we fail, right? And can we even fail, right? What I've come to understand is that failure is just feedback, right? It's just information on what doesn't work, right? And we've all heard that saying of Thomas Edison, right? When he was trying to invent the filament for the gorgeous light bulb that we're all so grateful for, where he said, like, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but something about like, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I haven't failed once, really. I'm just, I've succeeded in proving like 10,000 ways that don't work, right? So failure is just feedback. So if perfection doesn't exist and failure doesn't really exist either, it's just feedback, then when we're chasing perfect to avoid failure, like that just sounds like a whole lot of wasted energy and a whole lot of crazy, right? That we could be using to be who we are and get what we want, right? Instead of chasing this elusive perfection in order to avoid failure that also doesn't exist either, right? So I hope that like shines a little bit of a light on perfectionism for you in your own life, how you can see how for you it's a coping mechanism, and that it really isn't helping you anymore, and it's really nothing that we can achieve anyways, because it's that mirage that we can't actually ever get to, right? We're just going to keep chasing it and we're never actually going to get to it. So leave me a comment. Have you struggled with perfectionism? What do you think it has held you back from? Or how has it kept you like in that paralysis, that paralyzed state of not going forward and not trying what you want? Procrastinating, because perfectionism is just the other side of the coin. For procrastination is just the opposite side of the coin of perfectionism. And like, can you see how the pursuit of perfectionism actually contributes to failure, because it stops us from doing things that we really want to do, you know? And it's kind of a whole new way to look at perfectionism. And if you can have some compassion for yourself around that, it's a lot easier to notice it and just let yourself off the hook about it. Okay, so leave me your thoughts. I'll be checking back. And thank you for being here, and have a great day. All right, talk soon. Bye-bye.